Welcome, everyone. My name is Melody Patry. I am the Advocacy Director at Access Now, and it is a great honor for me to be joined today for this fireside chat by Niklas Zennstro, who most people know as the co-founder and CEO of Skype, and who is now the CEO of Atomico, one of Europe's leading VC firm. Hi, Niklas.
Great to be here, Melody.
So let's dive immediately in. The reason why actually we're speaking through screens and why we're having RightsCon online this year is a response to COVID-19 and the pandemic that went. The pandemic. So ourselves at Access Now, we had to adopt new tools and be innovative and find technologies that would be suitable for an online summit. And we're not the only ones who had to seek solutions and technical solutions as a response to COVID-19. Around the world, a lot of governments have tried to adopt various tools and various apps, especially tracking apps as a response to the pandemic to do prevention measures, but also immediate response to the pandemic. I was wondering, for you, as you invest in lots of companies, what has been your immediate response to COVID-19?
So as an investment firm, what we did when the pandemic hit us, so we're based in the UK, we first of all, we locked down and started to work from home 2 weeks before the lockdown. And I think for us and for a lot of other, actually most tech companies and other investment firms I've been speaking to, that switch to working from remotely was so seamless and remarkably seamless. And so our first focus was safety of our team, so make sure everyone was safe and could work from home. Secondly, was our portfolio companies, and we engaged with all our portfolio companies. And I think that we probably had more board meetings in 3 months than we had in 3 years. And we advised all our companies to do whatever they could to also to have this kind of 3-stage approach, to focus first on the team, secondly on their business, and third also what they can participate in society to help combat this pandemic. So it was very much about these companies to help them to preserve cash, to extend their runway, because these companies are typically still burning money. They're not profitable because they're early stage growth companies. So they're dependent on raising new funds. And when the market is turning down, investors are usually shying away. So it's critical for the survival of these tech companies, these startup companies. We're not talking about the big tech giants. We're talking about young startup companies, to preserve their cash so they can last longer without raising more capital. So that was the first thing we did with them and ourselves. And then the third thing what we did was also, both as a firm but also through our companies, start to think, how can we engage in the society to combat the crisis situation that we were all finding ourselves in. And part of that is, of course, is used to biggest possible extent possible to work remotely to help to stop the virus spread, which we did. And the other one was like thinking through, how can we then proactively work? What are the companies that we have investments in that can actually help to do positive things to combat the crisis?
Thank you. So did you notice a spike in interest, and have you been approached by more companies that had maybe a focus on fighting the pandemic, or did you yourself looked into the companies you were already investing in and see what were the solutions available there?
Yeah, so there are two things there. One was that we certainly, what we did was work with our companies that we are investors in. So we typically are on the board of these companies. We are not we are minority investors, so we cannot tell them what to do. We can only advise and encourage them. So that's what we did. And a few of our companies actually did a lot of things that are great that we were very proud of. And as an example, AcuRx, which is a company in the UK, which are now in I think majority or almost a majority of all GP practices providing messaging service, they quickly launched a telehealth video consultation service so that they enabled GP practices in the UK to do remote consultation. Obviously, this was not primarily for COVID, but as one of the challenges that healthcare system had when they had to focus on COVID, as normal health practice, primary practice, and other practices had a setback. So providing telehealth was a great thing. Another example was FarmDrop is another company in the UK, which is providing a marketplace enabling consumers to buy produce, food from local producers, from local farmers, local fishermen, local bakers, and so forth. And when we had the lockdown and supermarkets had empty shelves, it really proved out that the global supply chain for food was in a bit stressed out, but FarmDrop really could really increase the capacity. At the same time, provide food for people in the UK, or primarily London, I must say, but also provide a livelihood for those farmers who then could continue to provide even more food. Another example is Scoutbee, which is a company that is helping big enterprises with managing their supply chain. And they actually kind of did a lot of product innovation to help to provide a global database for companies to find other suppliers. Obviously, the whole supply chain was a bit challenged. And another one is another health company, ZocDoc in New York, which is a marketplace helping people to find doctors. They also switched on telehealth and had a huge spike in telehealth practices. So that's kind of the primary things we did with our portfolio companies. The other thing that we saw was that, and not only us, but all tech investors saw that there's, I think the first kind of assumption when we're entering this new situation, and of course it's also becoming a demand is in general decreasing. But what happened was that there was a huge shift to digitalization and to online, both from enterprises and from consumers. So there was a lot of companies which are benefiting from that. And I'm sure most people have seen, now they're certainly used to, something like Zoom that maybe not so many people used before, but that's a company which is a good example of a huge beneficiary of this kind of pandemic and the lockdown. So there is actually, for investors, specifically for venture investors like ourselves, this actually represents a huge opportunity to invest in companies that are accelerating kind of online and remote working and also remote kind of e-commerce and other ways to kind of communicate remotely. So those are the things that are being on the kind of, I would say, kind of the silver lining for someone like us.
Yes, connectivity is a big theme this year at RightsCon, especially access to the internet. It's really interesting. Some of the examples that you brought in are direct, I would say, collaboration or partnerships between private companies developing specific tools and governments, in this case, like health ministries or the branch of government responsible for health and access to healthcare. I was wondering, because so many things happen in a really accelerated way, as you said, and we rushed sometimes to some solutions, some of them with little oversight when it came to respect for privacy and compliance with other human rights. What really can people do and in response to those partnerships between companies and governments? And yourself, you said like you're often like a minority stakeholder in those companies, but is there a way for you to influence, or what is your approach when it comes to ensuring that privacy and other rights are respected in those kind of government company partnerships?
So so think about that question. I think it's actually not a big difference whether a service is provided through governments or to end users, or directly from the company itself, the tech company itself. I think that we all need to ensure that privacy is respected. And so if you think about the tech company that normally would provide their services directly to the consumers, we need to ensure that as a society we have a system in place to keep check on these companies, so that the rights of citizens are protected. And I think that is exactly the same that needs to apply, whether that service is provided through a government procurement and paid for by taxpayers' money. So I don't think that there should be a separate system in place. I think that we all have responsibilities. Whether we certainly think that we have a responsibility as an investor and as a usually we are board members of these companies, to ensure that these companies are considering privacy and other kind of rights for its end users and other stakeholders.
Yeah, no, that's right. And when we see actually in the categories of most used apps in response of the pandemic, one of the most the most popular applications that were used were mostly voice and video chat. So you created Skype. What was your reaction when you saw all of this happening, and did you think that the sector was ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that when we launched Skype a long time ago now in 2003, and then we launched a video in early 2004, I think. We didn't know if that was too early for video, but it turns out that it was a great timing for video, and we certainly enjoyed a lot of success. And we had, hundreds of millions of people using Skype for video calling all around the world, and it really connected people and brought people together. So that's something that I'm certainly very kind of proud of. And what we have seen now is just the kind of the next wave of demand for video, and where I would say before the lockdown, the video was used maybe more as an alternative. So as an alternative way to meet, where the people's primary way to meet was always in person, and we got on an airplane or we drove a car, we were stuck in traffic, and we were in public subways and buses and whatsoever, and wasted both time and carbon emission to meet. What happened in the lockdown was that there was a flip, where the primary way to meet is via video, and now it becomes a very rare thing to meet in person in real life. So that's what has kind of really kind of made a big step change. But we wouldn't be able to do this if the infrastructure was not ready for it. And whether you're using Zoom, Meet, Hangout, Teams, or Skype, or any other FaceTime, WhatsApp video, etc., none of these would work if video was not something that was very popular. Video communication was something that was very popular for 10, 15 years. And it wouldn't work if the internet wasn't built out with this massive infrastructure. And I think certainly I was surprised, and many others were surprised that the last mile of the internet didn't kind of break down in terms of congestion, because there were so many people sitting at home doing video calls. So in a way, we're very fortunate. In a way, it's like if this pandemic would have happened 15 years earlier, we would struggle as a world economy, because we didn't have the cloud. Remote working wouldn't really work at all. And the capacity for video calls would not be sufficient. So now we have such a great infrastructure, so that it just, and the other thing that most of us are finding out, that it's so much more efficient, and we can work from where we want to work, and it's more efficient to have video meetings. But I would also say that the other thing that at least I realized is that I value maybe more in-person meetings, to get together in depth, to get to know people, and to bond and build strong relationships. And I think also when you really want to be creative it's probably nothing is better than getting together in person.
So when you talked about like the fact that everyone was moving to video calls, you also mentioned the demands and the expectations that people had when they turned to those tools. I know that this community is particularly interested, or one of its fierce demands is towards encryption. And as privacy advocates, like we're almost asking sometimes developers to build tools with encryption by default, or really strong privacy settings by default. I'm not just talking about Skype, I'm talking also about all of those new tools, those that are new, those that don't exist yet. What are your thoughts towards encryption and really strong privacy by default when you innovate?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really, really important question. And I think the reality with the internet, even from the beginning, when I started, early on in my career, when I started, the internet was always an insecure network. You have to assume that whatever you're transmitting on the internet is available for anyone to tap into, whether that is a government or a hacker or just, whoever just having, downloading some tools and sniffing your Wi-Fi network. And in the early days of the internet, there was a big criticism from the telecom industry that it was an uncontrollable network, that was very anarchic, there was no governance. And always the way, from the early on, the way to provide privacy was end-to-end encryption. And that is still the way to provide privacy today, is end-to-end encryption. So anyone who wants to stay private and want to have private conversations or private messages without anyone eavesdropping on it needs to have strong end-to-end encryption. And that's just very, very fundamental thing, so that if you don't have end-to-end encryption, you're just going to have to assume that someone have the ability, and if they have the ability to, they probably will potentially listen into you. The thing that has changed over the last 10 years or so was that in the old days was maybe that it was maybe someone wanted to tap into you because they were interested in what you were saying, because actually just to kind of actually to eavesdrop. Today, it's been a commercial benefit to tap into where you are, who you are, what interests you have, how you feel. So there's a huge industry today, advertisement industry, that is benefiting from collecting information about you as an individual. And that's the big difference from in the old days. So I think we just need to kind of separate these two different things, that when you think about, there's private communication and there's an industry that is benefiting from knowing about you to serve your ads, to provide services to you that you don't pay for.
Thank you. And actually, speaking about like ads and how we protect ourselves from ads, or whether we want ads or we don't want ads, and what kind of ads we want. We're both in Europe, where there are strong privacy and data protection regulation. Some detractors to this regulation are saying that it's killing innovation, or that it's preventing innovation. And recently, at the same time, we've seen backlash from practices in US and Chinese tech groups because of their lack of consideration for privacy, for data protection, and human rights in general, but also for diversity. Do you think that, first of all, is this I want to call it a myth, that protecting human rights prevents innovation? So is this myth for you? I mean, you innovated, you founded Skype, you invest in very ambitious programs and projects. So do you think that there is a real antagonism between innovation and human rights?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and it's very easy to make that blanket statement that all these privacy laws, whether that's GDPR or others, that are stifling innovation, and use that as a blanket statement for doing whatever you want to do as a company. we, I think, because if that's the kind of approach that we have, I think we're in very, very dangerous territory. And I think that's not okay. We did a survey. So we issue this report, State of European Tech, each year, end of each year. And we did a survey a year and a half ago among founders of technology companies in Europe. We asked them if they thought that GDPR was hindering them to pursue their business objectives. And the other thing we asked them was that if they thought that GDPR was a good thing for society. And there were more people who responded that they thought that founders, so leaders of companies, CEOs, who responded that they think that GDPR is a positive thing for society. There were more people who answered yes to that than the CEOs who answered that it was stifling their innovation or their progress for their businesses. So it's very, very rare that we hear from any company when we invest and we work with these companies that they say that, you know, privacy regulation is stifling what they do in terms of progressing their business. Now, I would say when we think about, I would say that the other point I would say here is that when we come to big data and we think about AI and machine learning, there's a lot of amazing solutions that can provide it and that will be provided by machine learning and artificial intelligence. I was thinking specifically in healthcare, in preventing, you know, in producing treatments for diseases. One of our companies, Helix, is using machine learning to find treatments to rare diseases which have too small patients group for big pharma to provide solutions for. Now, because of privacy laws in terms of how much companies can access health data that is being protected by privacy laws, I think there is something to be done in terms of making that data available in a way that is completely protecting individuals' privacy. So I think there is something to be done there. But I think it's really important when whatever we do is that we make sure we're protecting people's privacy. And I would say also that if you take that other kind of the first statement, like, well, if there's no regulations we can access whatever data we have, then we're going to be have a competitive advantage. Now, China is going to win that game because they have different set of rules around this, and they also have a huge database of people. I think that's the game that I don't know if founders, certainly in Europe, really want to play. And I think that taking the high road here and saying that whatever companies that being built are there to honor data privacy and human rights, I think those are the companies that will be built in Europe. And I think Europe will take a leading role in those kind of companies because our heritage, how we think about privacy, how we think about respecting human rights, I think we have a leadership role there. But I also think that I'm certain about that the companies that are successful, specifically in tech, are the ones that can attract and recruit the best talent. And studies shows that talent in tech wants to work for companies which are ethical and which have an ethical approach. So I think that if you're taking like an unethical approach to this and say like, well, we're not going to respect privacy, you're not going to be able to attract the best talents in volumes. So I think it's a competitive advantage. I also think that customers are more and more starting to think about these issues as well. So companies which are respecting privacy will eventually be more attractive to customers than consumer. Today, that's not the case. Today, convenience wins over our concerns, and we because it's so difficult today to use operate online if you want to use products that fully are respecting, privacy rather than thinking of you as an individual as a product.
Yes, I think the human rights advocate in me jumped a bit when I heard you say China is going to win this game. but I think you're right. We see that increasingly companies have to listen to the people that are using their products and their tools. And we've seen in Europe already how the demands have increased, and especially actually like during COVID, if we make a comparison between the countries that have adopted tracking apps, for example, for COVID, the most popular apps have been the ones that were privacy respecting when they had also been in Ireland some education and some dialogue about what the app would do and would not be able to do, as opposed to in other countries. I know that in France, for example, the app was a disaster and the take-up was really low. So hopefully, I want to remain hopeful that strong privacy regimes and regulation can offer solutions, and that also the more that people will be familiar and used to having these rights protected and respected by companies, the more companies will have an incentive to apply them. I know that a lot of people in the chat have some questions. There is one more question that I could not ask you today, and then I will follow up with some of people's question, is because already since the beginning of RightsCon, we've heard lots of criticism of the tech's role in reproducing racist and discriminatory power structures in the digital age. And in a way, like the VC community, we could say, has failed to fund and to support non-male and minority or underrepresented founders, although I think many prominent firms have scrambled over the last couple of months. I know that this is not a new issue to Atomico, because you have your own diversity policy. I just wanted to ask you a bit more, like what are your thoughts with regards to these discussions, and what are the first steps towards a more equitable funding environment?
Yes, no, it's a huge problem, and it's been a huge problem for a very long time, and it's something that the industry is starting to wake up to, and it started with diversity and inclusion with regards to gender, with the Me Too movement, when the tech industry started to look at itself, and we certainly did, and say, like, we haven't done a good job. Most founders are white males who've gone to like good universities. There's a clear bias towards men and towards white men, which is not okay at all. And I think we just need to acknowledge as an industry, we have not done a great job at all, but that's not a reason to continue to not do a good job. We as a firm, we kind of woke up to this, with the Me Too movement. And I always thought, and I know that all of us in our team are very open-minded, growth mindsets, and trying not at all to have any kind of biases. But by just continuing the practice that everyone has done, you're repeating an ecosystem which is being built primarily by white men who went to good universities. So when we founded Skype in 2006, the founding thesis that we had was that great companies will come from everywhere. And when we thought about that, then it was not that great tech companies does not have to come only from Silicon Valley, because back then in 2006 that was the case, and we thought we proved to some extent that you can build an international company from Europe with Skype, and we had a conviction that founders are talented people, and talented people, just like talented musicians, painters, artists, poets, writers, athletes, they are born around the world, and they're born from all different ethnical backgrounds. They're born in all different social backgrounds. They're born in all different genders. So while we didn't think about this, that great companies can come from everywhere, we thought about that initially just as geography. But now we're realizing that just need to be extended to any kind of group of founders. And when we think about it that way, we're realizing that, wow, there's such a big universe of talented founders that we haven't really done a good job tapping into. So we kind of, when we thought about this more and more, not only did we realize that it's just the right thing to make sure you have a strong policy and a plan to make your firm and your investments more diverse and be more inclusive. It's actually a really good business, because a few things is that we know that from studies that diverse teams make better decisions. And as an investment firm, it's all about making investment decisions. And if we were all of us who look at investments, if we were all very similar, we would lose many perspectives. So having people from different ethnical backgrounds, and of course also different genders, will make us better investors. Numerous studies also showing that diverse group of teams are performing better as companies. So it's just much better business to really think through diversity and inclusion. So we've been, for a few years, we were much more focused on gender, and we set objectives for ourselves, both in our team, to make sure that we have a team that is diverse. And today we have 50% of our investment team is females and 50% men. So we've come a long way there. But I think on ethnical background, we're not there yet. So that's kind of the other things that we have to make an effort on. So what we can do as an investment firm, we can make sure that our team is more diverse. And we can also make sure that when we are investing in companies, we really think through, we have diversity and inclusion as a parameter when we're looking at companies. And also kind of looking at, are these founders really taking diversity and inclusion serious? And then we can work with our companies, portfolio companies also, for them very early on to set diversity and inclusion policies and strategies in place, and then give them toolkits to make that happen. And the third thing we can do is to engage with the grassroots stages of the ecosystem. So what we're doing now, we're working with a few grassroots organizations in Europe, which are helping founders from different backgrounds to learn and to encourage them how to build companies. This is something that is not going to be a flip over a day. It's going to take some time to get there, but I'm very encouraged to see, like, we're not like, I talk about what we do, but I see so many other firms. And again, I think this is really where the European firms are having a step ahead compared to our peers in other geographies.
Yeah, so we just need to keep banging that actually an equitable environment is better for business. and if you want a more important return for your money, you need to take those steps that you have mentioned to not just to promote, but actually walk the walk in terms of diversity and inclusion. I promised that we would answer some of the questions that have been put forth in the chat. So I'm just going to read to you one question, which refers to our previous question about end-to-end encryption and going a bit deeper. So someone is asking, do you think we should be mandating open source and end-to-end encryption for video software? It seems like Jitsi is the only solution that does group video and meets those criteria today. If not, how can users trust that the company is not snooping for corporate benefit or for the government of the hosted servers?
Yeah, I think the reality is that if you want to be certain that something is encrypted end-to-end, you need to have at least the encryption part of that service to be open source, alternatively being peer reviewed by a panel of experts who are trusted. But even that is not, I would say, it's not as secure as having that part open source. So I mean, that's what I can say. Then and then the question is like, is that something we should mandate or not? I mean, it's like, I think that yeah, I think that you will, there are, we have all kind of, read about, the discoveries that Snowden did. So we know that governments are having capacity to, to listen into what we say and what we do, and not only through the communication layers, but they can probably get into your computers. And so then so everything is used as weak as the weakest link, right? So then you need to then think through, okay, what about your end device? What about the operating system? And so it's not as trivial as that is just like, let's fix the end-to-end communication. But I think that, the reality is like, if you want to be certain that you are safe, you need to have kind of open source. When we created Skype, I think we were the pioneers of end-to-end encryption in a commercial closed source communication service, and we did that because we had to, because our communication went through it was a peer-to-peer communication. So if you and I had a communication, it might go through, it's very possible to go through a third-party end user. So if you didn't encrypt, that person could just sniff our traffic and listen into us. So we thought it's like, we have to. And then, of course, you have government agencies coming to you and say, well, we need to help you to kind of, with wiretapping, because there's some terrorists or some criminal gangs. And we couldn't really do anything about it at the time because we had encrypted service. But we also know that there was a lot of activists out in the field who used Skype and relied on Skype to be secure. But I know that some people ask me, and I could only give them my word at the time. But if things are open source, for sure it is peer reviewed. I think that's kind of would be, if you really want to be safe, then should it be mandated? Maybe it's a good question. I think that, but it's also, the other thing though is that also that we also have a choice, right? There's so many different alternatives out there, and there are open source communication services that you can use, and they're not as convenient as the closed source ones. And I think that's one of the challenges. But we do have, there are alternatives, and then you think through it, like what about your browser, what about the operating system, and so forth.
Thank we're really towards the end of this chat, but I also wanted to ask you, because yesterday there was this very important hearing in the US of the four big tech companies, and so I was wondering what were your thoughts when it comes to the concentration and consolidation of the private sector on the internet. And obviously, like this is a bit of a biased question coming from us, but do you think that it is jeopardizing internet core values such as openness, freedom, and permissionless innovation and resilience? And as we know, I mean, some of the tools are even growing in the current circumstances. So, is this for you like a threat or a jeopardy to the internet values?
Yeah, I think what's happening is that the rich get richer. The bigger you are, the bigger you get. You have so many competitive advantages. All those companies have huge advantages with regards to data. And I would say maybe Apple is different because they're actually making money from selling they're charging you buy a device from them and you actually pay them money. They don't make money primarily from your data. But all the others are, well, Amazon you buy things from also. But I think that it becomes hard to compete head-to-head with those companies. I think we need to be really careful when we say that, when we ask, if we make a statement that the fact that there's so much concentration that it undermines those fundamental value of openness, because it's not because there are only because that you have these platforms that so many people are using doesn't mean that the alternative is not there. There are plenty of alternatives for completely open services, and anyone is free to innovate. The existence of these big the FAANG companies are not kind of making it harder to innovate. They're also providing a lot of great tools for people to use, to innovate. It might make it harder to compete, head to head with them, because they have so much resources and there's so much advantage with data. But I think I would think that the problem is more of that there are a few companies which so many people in this planet are using. So when something goes wrong with those companies, it has a big impact on where their algorithms that they have, specifically the social networks, where those algorithms have too much bias. It doesn't have a small impact; it has a global, massive impact. But I don't think that that doesn't undermine the fundamental kind of values of the early internet, that was, where you could have permissionless innovation, because that still exists.
Thank you, Niklas. I'm afraid we've come to the end of this chat. Maybe just to wrap up, I think we've got like a minute or two. I know that some people in the chat have been asking also about like AI, technologies and so on. But you also, like, you're an innovator, you're a founder, you're a funder. So what should we be excited about? Like, what do you have your eyes on at the moment, and what do you feel comfortable sharing with in terms of
So I think that we by all means we really need to be worried, and we need to scrutinize what's happening with AI and how that can, because there's so much biases that where machine learning are being used, because and then you're using data set that has bias, and then that just automate that bias and escalating it. So that's something that we need to be worried about. We need to kind of work on that. But I would also say that it's not like AI is ultimately just bad. AI is like it's the most powerful tool that we have to our disposal to innovate. And the things that I'm really excited about, if I think about the next 10-year cycle with technology, is that I think that we will make huge progress in healthcare, in preventing cures and treatments for diseases that we didn't think about, that we couldn't do today. I think that's something we need to make sure that whatever we do here, we talked about stifling innovation, whatever we do to protect our privacy, we also need to make sure we can innovate. The other thing where I think where technology will have a huge impact is also combating climate. And there are more and more companies, because that is really the biggest challenge we have in front of us. And there are so many companies now, the founders are building companies which are using technology to provide products and services in a way that is replacing old ways to do things in a climate neutral way. So that's something that I'm also very excited about. But at the same time, we really need to work with companies and ensure that from the early days when they're being founded, and the early days of the kind of the formative years of companies, that these founders are building cultures and value sets that are inclusive, that are respecting fundamental rights, and thinking through who are the stakeholders that can be affected by our service. And what is so encouraging is that, now young founders are building companies today. They look at the big tech companies. They don't say, oh, I want to build the next Facebook, I want to build the next YouTube. They say, like, they want to build a company that is also learning from these companies, both what those big companies did great, because they did all the great things, but also some of the mistakes that they did because they didn't get the right advice early on. And very much about that is building companies which are thinking through all the different stakeholders in society, whether those are third party, maybe consumers, others, the society and planet. And that's something that young founders now are responding to really, really well. So that makes me really excited about that the next generation of tech companies will be much more inclusive, and they will build cultures which are fundamentally much more inclusive and respectful of all different rights.
Thank you so much, Niklas, for ending on a positive and somehow like hopeful note when it comes to the technologies that are coming next to us. I encourage everyone to keep those conversations in the various forums that are available to the RightsCon community and beyond. And Niklas, thank you so much again. It was really helpful to hear your thoughts and your perspective on all of those complicated issues. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Melanie. Yeah. Pleasure.